Alrighty then. So, as I said, it is my great honor to welcome out Ryan K Lindsay, Dale Simpson, and Doug TheSlorg. Alrighty, now that everyone's seated, I figure the best idea, after taking selfies, would be to introduce them, and we'll go from right to left, because that makes sense. And so, Ryan, would you like to tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. Is this on?
Could we also get the microphones turned on, and in the meantime, use mine?
Hey guys, my name is Ryan K Lindsay. I'm a writer. I wrote the Rainbow Dash Micro Series one-shot through IDW, so completely licensed through Hasbro. I've written a handful of other comics as well. I've appeared in Image Comics. I've got a series coming out in March through Monkey Brain on Comixology, and I've got another series appearing later in the year, so a fair bit of words out there.
It is working. I am Dale Simpson. I am known on FiMFiction as AgentBookFort. I mostly spent my time writing fanfics about pastel-colored unicorns. Bright Eyes, Twilight Sparkle Goes to Bed, Connections, and Finding Heaven are the ones that I'm most known for, and that's pretty much what I do.
Hello, I am Doug TheSlorg. I'm the newest pre-reader at Equestria Daily. I've also written quite a few fics myself, probably the most famous of which would be Ponyfall Australia, The Day My Beard Turned Into Pinkie Pie, and the latest one would be If Only in My Dreams, which was just posted a few days ago on Equestria Daily.
Awesome. So, I figure a good question to start on, because it's a nice starting point, is two. It's kind of two questions. One, what is your main writing style, as in genre, and what is your favorite one, either to write or read, whichever way you want to go?
I prefer to write in slice of life and sad fics. I prefer to read a good comedy, adventure, things like that.
I probably write mostly comedy, but a lot of them tend to turn sad, so it's kind of unintentional, but it just goes that way. My favorite is probably comedy.
I write comics mostly, but I've written a bunch of other stuff. But most of the comics I write seem to have like a more of a down, sort of mature ending to them. Most of the time, characters don't always come out alive in my issues, but Rainbow Dash definitely survived. I can promise you that much.
Okay, so I figure another good thing so we can get to know you guys is just quickly, favorite ponies.
Favorite main six is Rarity for her complexity. Background ponies are Lyra and Junebug.
Favorite main six is Twilight Sparkle and Rainbow Dash. Favorite background pony is Coco Pommel.
I gotta say, Rainbow Dash was awesome to write her. It's just very, very cool. Very interesting character when you sort of boil her down as to like what makes her tick, which was something I really tried to do once I got the assignment. Outside of that, Vinyl Scratch, very, very interesting character. And within my issue, myself and the artist Tony Flicks, we came up with these gremlins that are slowly appearing in the comics more. So they're very cool to check out.
So I was talking to Dale about this actually, because he was telling me about how one of the stories he wrote, which was Twilight Sparkle Goes to Bed, took him, what, like a day, an hour or something like that. And then he had his one Bright Eyes, which took him weeks and weeks and weeks to do. And yet he feels, I believe, that Twilight Sparkle Goes to Bed is more successful. And I guess you'd call that your breakthrough. How does that make you feel?
Bright Eyes was definitely my breakthrough. I woke up one morning, 4 hours after it had been posted, and it was 200, 300 favorites and just kept going for the rest of the week. Twilight Sparkle Goes to Bed, same thing, except twice as fast. And I was wondering, well, if short one-shots are the way to go, why am I doing this? Because I love it.
It's all about the effort to reward kind of value there.
It is the effort to the reward, but where is the reward in... No. Nah.
You gotta love it, son.
As far as my stories, my first story that I wrote was flat out rejected by Equestria Daily. Big time. They didn't even read it. And when I really decided that, I can do this, I wrote, what was it called? The Cutie Mark Master in 4 hours. And it was accepted the next day. So that one was the first of the features. And same thing, sometimes it just happens.
The story for you might be different. So what was your kind of big break? Was it the comics? Is that what happened?
Yeah. I mean, getting the gig to write an official My Little Pony comic, it sold in the top 100 comics of that month. I think we pushed in the initial sales about 35,000 copies, which is a lot more than my other comic that I self-published, and I'm sitting at about maybe 300 sales. So you can imagine it's a big step up, it's a bigger audience, and the fan base is way more dedicated. So I had to make sure I brought real A game. So to write my issue, it probably took me about maybe a week and a half to write the issue. Maybe first 2 or 3 drafts, so that you bang it out, and then you go over it. I'm a primary school teacher by day, and I was teaching Year 5 at the time, and I had some really keen pony fans in my class. So I'd sort of like just fly stuff by them subtly without them knowing it was about to appear in a comic. I was like, what do you think if Rainbow Dash did this or said this? And they were like, oh, that'd be awesome. I'm like, all right, I'll put that in the book. And then a good mate of mine, Paul Aller, who writes a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics for IDW, I ran the issue past him, and he gave me a lot of notes. So all told, it probably took me about a month and a half to get it to the very final stage. And then the process is we send it off to Hasbro. So my editor at IDW gives it to Hasbro, and they came back with a bunch of notes. My favorite note was, Ryan, there is no Sun Tzu, the art of war in Equestria. And I was like, oh, who knew? So I had to change that reference. But they let me, man, my comic, we reference Batman, specifically Miller's Dark Knight Returns. We reference Nolan's Batman. There's a Fight Club line snuck in there. We've got David Bowie referenced in there, and they were totally cool with letting us do a lot of that. We steal the Blade Runner soliloquy and ponify it. So I sent all that in, and my editor was like, I don't know if IDW wants little girls, reading a ponified version of Tears in Rain from Blade Runner. And I was like, just see what happens. And they totally let it through. And then the villains, these gremlins, I tried to make them sound as much like Stan Lee, Marvel-like villains from the 60s as possible. And my editor was like, this is so wordy, it will never fly with the kids. And it didn't get touched by Hasbro. They were just like, yep, it sounds cool. So that was awesome to do a lot of that stuff. So I really worked, I like the pop culture references. If anyone's been reading the main series of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic by Katie Cook and Andy Price, they've got like Magnum PI in the background. There was an Indiana Jones. Like they slip all that stuff in. So if she was doing it, and I got to read a lot of her issues before they came out, I was like, yeah, I feel good that I can do it. And then I tried to do a bunch of stuff for the fans. So there's a bro hoof in there, and there's maybe a mention of a Sonic Double Rainboom, which was fun. So and it seemed to land with fans really well. So yeah, I put a lot of time. I really like redrafting my work so that when I send it to the editor, it's not a hatchet job that needs so much work afterwards. I show it to discerning people beforehand. I sneakily run it past the 10-year-olds in my class, and then what came out, I was really happy with how it was received by the fans.
So on that topic, to you guys, because it's the same kind of thing, your creative process, how do you get your feedback? Because I'd imagine uploading rough drafts would be pretty daunting.
I have 3 friends that go over it every single time, sometimes 4 or 5, and each of them will give me their own feedback on what they think I should put in, what I should take out, fix, all things like that. And I do appreciate it, but they like to make my life rather hard.
I break every rule there is.
Yes!
You probably should not use my method, because my method is self-editing without having any pre-readers look at it. And, well, literally, I'll just write a few sentences, just sort of go over it myself and say, looks all right. And then later, about an hour later, I'll go back to that same sentence and I say, this is garbage. What am I doing? So, I mean, again, I just break all the rules. Sometimes I let some people look at it, but usually I don't like what they tell me. So I end up going with my own thing anyway.
How do you do the self-editing thing? I finish a draft and I just cannot do it.
I don't even have drafts.
The thought of editing.
I literally I'll sit on there sometimes on Word document. Sometimes I'll literally write straight into FiMFiction and just write. And that's all I do. I just write. And if I go back and I look at it and I like it, then that's the first thing I do is I write for myself, then for the readers. So if I like it, I'm hoping that they'll like it. As far as grammar and whatnot, usually it's a good idea to sleep on it and come back to it a little bit later, because I am still finding errors in the stories that have been published online. And
do you reckon that, like, is going to segue into another topic of like criticism and stuff? But do you get people being like, well, you should probably, you know, edit your stuff? Do you get comments that are that are harsh on you?
usually they just, like, just last night I got a comment that told me that my ending was terrible. And that made me feel real good waking up, getting ready for the convention, and yeah, your story stinks, you know? But everybody's going to have an opinion, and not everybody is going to like your work. And you need to know that if you're going to write. Not everyone will be pleased. This is a day of analysts, you know, this day and age, where they will analyze every little thing. Every word you write will be analyzed, and if you get one little thing wrong, they will let you know. And they can be my editors.
Can I ask quickly out of the audience, hands up if you've written any fanfic or want to write any sort of My Little Pony stuff? Right on, cool, hands down. But one of the things I would say is, like, he's absolutely right. The internet especially, you know, opinions are like hands. Everybody has them. Not everyone knows how to use them. But if you're going to read reviews, you have to take the good with the bad. Like, I can't read all the positive reviews and then when someone doesn't like something, be like, you're wrong. I just sort of look at it and go, I can't get the ego inflamed from the good stuff and then ignore the bad. You either ignore it all, or you don't view it all, or you read it all. And I feel that when I write My Little Pony, I'm writing it for the audience. It's my job to read the reviews to know how it landed, because I wrote it for you. And I want to know if I did a good job or how it went, or if I did a bad job and how I could improve it next time. So I read that, but I always read it at an arm's length so that it's not going to crush me, because the internet inherently will grab your soul and fold it 7 times and flick it away. And you need to have enough barriers to be able to block that off, but you should still be learning from it. And I think that you take the lessons that will apply for you. And I mean, I've had reviews for different works, and sometimes I'll say, yeah, you got me. And sometimes I'll read it and go, well, you're wrong because you missed something. But I'm not going to go hack out at that person and go, oh, you got it wrong, oh, we're going to get into an argument on Twitter. It's sort of not how it works. You've just got to be very open to the criticism, whether it's from friends doing it or whether it's, you know, Wampa Fan 79 on the forums. You've just got to be very open around and about that, which is hard. Like, we're creative. We inherently hate ourselves, unfortunately, so no one's going to do that job better. But we absorb a lot. You're very empathic as a writer or as a creator or an artist. And so, yeah, the internet can be your best friend some days, and some days you've just got to be understanding of it.
And you also need to sift through the constructive criticism and the criticizing criticism. If you let the bad things get to you, you're not going to get far. You have to look at for the people who are trying to help you. If they say that a comma shouldn't be there, you could have written it this way, take that in. If someone comes along and says, this sucks, ignore it.
Well, going further in that, if they're going to spend the time to actually leave feedback, regardless of whether they're a troll or literally giving you constructive criticism, they cared enough to write something about it. So they're reading your stuff. And you have to really sit back and before you just automatically say, oh, troll, you know, think about it. And remember that they took the time to write that, really think about it, and decide for yourself, is this worth fixing? You know, maybe I should fix it. Maybe I'll do it in the next story. So,
actually, I really like the fact that you don't care too much about editing. Weirdly, no, it's just because it means that you're doing it for yourself, which is like what you said. It's all about you, which is, I think, that the channels into your work. But that being said, even though you probably don't care about it too much, and I'm going to pose this to everyone, what's the worst thing someone said about your work? Because I have a YouTube channel, and you can imagine putting your face up there, people get really mean. And like the worst thing I've had said was that I look like an orangutan.
You don't.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me.
I love you.
Hug.
To be honest, my issue got really good reviews, which I was stoked about. And then when the trade came out, I checked a few forums. And some people were like, let's list the issues in the order in which we liked them. Didn't actually do that well. But I took it on board and was just like, at first I looked at it and wept violently, and it happens. And then once you dry your eyes, I sort of went through and went, oh, there's like 12 people out of a forum that includes thousands. I was like, they're entitled to their opinion. But the key thing is this, I literally couldn't tell you a word now that they wrote on there. It's not worth remembering. Like if it's especially just like, I don't like it because of this. Oh, I think about it at the time, but it doesn't stick with me. I'm not stewing on it months later. I could tell you some of the words from possibly some good reviews, but I don't let the black stuff stick like tar. You just let it wash off. So I honestly couldn't remember what the worst thing out there is, but they're out there if you want to Google for them. I guarantee.
I couldn't think of the worst thing that someone said to me because it's just kind of in the background, but the most interesting thing that someone's ever said to me regarding something negative is they took great exception to the fact that I tried to make a pony version of Braille and they would not stop talking about it.
I remember every bad thing you guys have told me.
A man after my own heart.
I remember. I will never forget. Hush you. Probably the worst thing that's been told to me as far as writing is concerned. If you're not familiar with Ponyfall, it's a collaboration between, at now, about 8 writers, all the same story, all from different viewpoints. But when it began, we had 36 writers. Terrible idea. And there came a time when I was writing this, putting it on FiMFiction, and a few stories got released. Mine was getting ready to be released, and it was just chaos. People were writing very terrible things about ponies. And it was my job to try to save the collaboration because they were going to kick it off FiMFiction. And somebody told me that rather than try to save this garbage, you should die. All your other writers should die, and you should just be forgotten from the face, from the face of Earth.
That seems fair to me.
Yeah.
Did you?
I did die, and I came back. So I am here. It was an experience.
How often, because it's a cliche question, how often, like when you guys think of your stuff, how often is it just spur of the moment? Because like whenever I think of inspiration for pretty much anything, I'm waking up at 3 in the morning. Well, let's be honest, I'm probably already awake, and just something pops up, and I write it down.
It is the most inconvenient times. Whether I am driving or working, it is when I'm far away from a computer.
Pretty much that. Anytime I'm out and I don't have a way to write something down or I don't have a laptop on me, I'll think of something really awesome, and I'm like, oh, I got to remember this. I got to put this in the story. And then I'll forget it by the time I get home. But the day my beard turned into Pinkie Pie, that was about 3 o'clock in the morning, very hyped up on caffeine. It was a very weird time, and if you read the story, you'll understand.
You can't sit there and think of a story idea. Trying to do that is like, trying to sniff the number 9. Doesn't work. You're not going to get anything out of it. So I find story ideas come from the craziest places. I got one on the plane flying down here, looking out the window, and I was looking at the clouds, sparked an inspiration for an alien invasion story. Very, very tangential between clouds and alien invasion, but the mind starts to trigger. And the thing I'll say is this, the more you use your creative side of the brain, the more it's active. It's like a muscle. So if you want to be able to run a marathon, you run every day, all right? You want to be able to bench press a car, you probably die in the efforts, but you try to bench press smaller things and you work your way up. So the more creative you want to be, the more creative you have to be, if that makes sense. And then stuff will just start appearing. You'll see a person and it will trigger an idea. And there's a difference between an idea and a story. And I say that to a lot of people who are writers or breaking out as writers. You can have an awesome idea. If there's not a story linked to it, nobody cares. And so you can't just have an idea and go, oh, I'm going to write that. Who's there in the story? Why do I care about them? And so you need to make sure then that you have to think about the structure, the characters, they're all really important. So you get that kernel first, and it usually is an idea. Sometimes for me it's a character. Sometimes for me it's an image. Sometimes it's a line, a sentence, and then you just sort of work, and you have to build your own independent skill set of how you break story. I find I write it down. So I'll write a story down, and then I'll turn the page and I'll write it like, not the whole thing obviously, but you write down the basic plot points. Then I'll do it again 3 days later without looking at the first page, and I'll see what my mind wants to keep, what it drops, what it adds in between the raindrops there, and you slowly sort of flesh it out, which is a really sort of fun and powerful thing to do. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it won't work, sometimes you need to go away from the story or the idea, but they just come from life around you. And that's why I'll say to a lot of writers, you've got to get out and actually be doing stuff, not just writing. So whether it's getting out and going for a surf, walk to the shops, shopping centers, you look at the way people interact, you people watch. Not creepy, but you people watch. And you start to get these ideas. I watch movies or I'll watch TV. Because what it does is it switches off this annoyed front brain and it lets your subconscious stew on it. And I always find I'll sit at the computer and try to break a line for the next page or whatever, and it won't work, and so then I'll go sit down and I'll start watching Hannibal, and something will pop, and I'm like, oh, okay, I just needed to chill out, because if you sit there staring at the cursor blinking, it's counterproductive. It's not really good. It's like walking outside of your house and looking at the longest road and going, I have to run down all of that. You don't do it. You just sort of think about little pieces. Be happy to walk away from it sometimes. And in the end, if your story is no good, and you will know this, you will know if your story is not good enough. Walk away from it. Leave it. Because some people are like, no, I've got my doubts, but I'll just rush it out. I just want people to see it. Do you want people to see your story, or do you want people to see your good story? And sometimes, and I've shelved some great ideas that didn't become great stories. You have to be willing to do that, because if you're any good, you will have another story. If you're no good and you only have the one story, then that's going to be a problem. Be happy to walk away from great ideas if they don't work as a story.
There is a difference between what should be written about and what should be thought about. You may have a great idea, but it won't work on paper. That being said, though, if you have inspiration, act on it, because inspiration doesn't come all the time. One of my recent stories, Finding Heaven, was based off Harlan Ellison's My Big Friend Sam, because I found the concept of someone finding heaven very, very interesting, and I could use that.
I just want to add something to what Ryan said earlier. If you find yourself staring at a computer screen, just trying to think of what else to write, get off the computer, go outside, and you will find inspiration.
So I think what's going to happen, you guys start thinking of questions, because I'm going to run through the crowd and we're going to take questions. Before we do, I just have one last topic, which is, I know that the first part of this won't apply, well, my example won't apply to you, but that's okay, you can answer the rest of it. Because as any creative person, there is always a zone, like when you're in the writing kind of mood and you get in that zone. And for example, I know that a lot of people find that with, if they write in pen and paper instead of typing on a computer, for example. Do you guys have like your little things which let you get in the zone, and what gets you in the flow exactly, essentially?
I will spend days thinking about an idea, going over it constantly, just not stopping, and sleeping on it, working on it, driving on it, and once it's ready, that's when I start.
I think when I get into the zone is when I really feel that I am there with the characters. And, you know, sometimes they say it's a bad thing, but sometimes the characters start to write themselves. But for me, usually that's a good thing, because you are feeling what the characters are feeling, and if you can't feel it, your reader's not going to feel it. So that's when I'm in the zone, it feels like the character's right there, and I can just literally ask them anything, and I'll know what answer they're going to give me. So that's when I'm in the zone.
I will say, and some people find this confronting, write every day. if you write every day, you will write every day. How simple is that? But it'll come easier as well. And I can't remember the author who said it, but he said a good writer, a real writer, doesn't wait for inspiration. He sits down and writes, or she sits down and writes, and I 100% agree with that. And the more you do it, like I said, that creative muscle, I can remember when I started writing years ago, I would have a day where I'd sit down and nothing would come, and I'd be like, oh, well, it's not my day. I haven't had one of those days in a long time. Something always comes, because the muscle that writes for me in the brain works really well. As far as sort of wooing yourself and setting the mood, for me, Spotify. I have a list of soundtracks. I write to instrumental music. I don't even know like how many hours is on this playlist. It is intensely long, and I know certain soundtracks that work for different projects, which is really cool. There are things like the Enter the Dragon soundtrack, works for every project. But I go through that and I just listen to that music. That'll send to me. But you know, I've got a day job as a teacher. I have 2 kids under 4. I can't wait for the right moment or anything like that. If I have half an hour, I use half an hour. Yesterday, I realized that the Escape from New York was on at the cinema here in Carlton, and I was like, well, I guess I'm not writing tonight. I got to go see Snake Plissken. So instead of catching a cab to my hotel, I waited for the courtesy bus, which saved me money and paid for the ticket, and also gave me time to get on my phone, and I used Google Drive, and I knocked out an interview for an upcoming comic. So you use every moment, and I write a lot on my phone. When my daughter was born a year ago, I wrote a one-shot comic on my phone between the hours of midnight and 4 over the first 3 weeks, because she didn't sleep so well. So I'd harness up, and I'd go for a walk around my neighborhood with a phone and a baby on me, hoping I didn't trip or fall in a manhole, but I'd use those hours. And so it gets to a point where you use whatever you've got, because a trap that you can fall into is saying, the muse isn't with me today. That's dangerous, because the muse may be on leave for a while. And if you want to pump out work and write terrible stuff, write awful things, you should see my hard drive and the amount of scripts that are terrible, woeful, and you will never ever see them, but I wrote them because you're going to write roughly 10,000 pages of garbage before you start to get good. And I spent hours, years writing that garbage, and I'm maybe starting to get good now. So don't be afraid to write just terrible stuff and then shelve it, because it's called practice. You don't see someone that's like, I think I'm going to be a basketball player. Hey, Chicago Bulls, sign me up. I'm going to take my first shot in the game. Doesn't happen. They play for years. No difference with writing, absolutely. But if you write every day, you will become your own muse. I promise you, with no guarantees.
All right, so do people have questions ready? All right. Coming down among you common people.
Could I just give a shout out to the people waiting in line in the Traders Hall? You guys are dedicated.
We'll start with you.
Thank you very much. I have a question about the quality of the... Hello, over here. Hi. Are you ever frustrated by the writing or perhaps the continuity of the main TV show?
We have like Pony Television in my issue, which I didn't realize there hadn't been Pony Television in the series. Now I submitted it to my editor, who submitted it to Hasbro, and everybody okayed it. And then the issue released, and there was a bit of a forum war where they were like, there should be no television. It's sepia-toned, it's old school stuff, but they were like, that doesn't exist. And I sort of went in there and was like, mea culpa, I didn't realize that it wasn't on the show. I haven't watched every single episode of the show. They have other technology. I assumed that'd be cool. And I assumed when Hasbro said it was cool, it was cool. And then my editor, Bobby Kernow, got on there and was like, yeah, guys, Hasbro said, tick, approved. So I guess they have television now. So little part of me felt bad. A little part of me was like, I just affected the whole Ponyverse, and you're welcome. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, it's tough. You guys, do you follow the constraints of things, or you just go nuts?
Sometimes. One of the stories I wrote was about Twilight being immortal, and this was weeks after Megan McCarthy had actually said, no, that's not going to happen. And essentially, you just have to write with the canon, but also with your own.
I try to follow the basics of the show. But if you're going to stray from it, I prefer to see an explanation. That said, I did write a story about Pinkie Pie becoming a beard, so that's hard to explain.
Hey guys, quick question about long-form writing, like on FiMFic. I noticed that, the one-shots are really popular. I'm trying to write this really quite elaborate, long, almost like a novel. Need some encouragement because it seems like they're kind of a neglected part of the writing fandom, or at least they don't get as much attention as perhaps they deserve. What's your opinion on that?
Keep going and keep trying. Eventually something will happen. Where you can, put it onto other forums. Make sure people can see it and just keep going. Every time you update, it will end up on the front page again.
I can say as a pre-reader that we love the short ones because we don't have to read as much. But yeah, keep going because I've noticed that as well. That part of it is if it does get featured on the blog in particular, if it's an ongoing series, it's going to get featured again and again and again. And the one-shots, they do need a little bit more love, in my opinion. But that said, make sure you write a really good one because...
I mean, my background is much more just comics-based, and we always say to people trying to break into writing, do something short. And I know when I started, I mapped out this Atlantean story over 60 issues. It was going to be my Sandman or Preacher, if anybody knows what those comics are. Yeah, no one's going to publish that from an unknown. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to follow me on that journey because they don't know who I am. And you'll find that a lot of fanship is following creators as much as, I mean, the ponies, everybody loves the ponies and follows the characters, and certain things like if you write Batman, you've got that fan base instilled. But I mean, especially when you're writing your own stuff or learning to write the short stuff. So I wrote some 5-page comics, and then I self-published a 22-page one-shot, just self-contained story. So I would say as well, try and write that short stuff, because if you can write a short story well, you're proving you can write any length well, because sometimes it's harder to be concise and yet nail it. And you can run the risk of people, if they don't care, they won't follow along, and you get a trickle-out effect. And so you'll be putting in as much effort for chapter 30 for 5 viewers, whatever. Whereas if you did a short and it pops up and people are like, oh, I can give this guy the 500 words that he needs, and you'll get 300 or whatever, you can maximize. But I wouldn't necessarily say don't do the long form, because those who do follow it, those that follow it that you grab, you may have them for life. So yeah, it's a balance, I would say.
All right, so any other questions? Lots of questions. I'll go straight to the front because you're easy.
This is for Slorg. What role does Moe have in relation to Victoria in Ponyfall?
This is about Ponyfall. Moe, he's a bit of a comic relief, but I can't reveal too much about what he's going to do in the story. However, he plays a much bigger role than you might imagine. I know that's not acceptable, but that's all I can tell you.
Okay, so I had someone who was next, which was this gentleman down here. Go for your life, son.
Hi. I've actually got two ish questions. Ish is a totally word, I'm sure. First question is actually from a friend of mine. How hard is it to... how do you write a first chapter of a story? I mean, it's... I personally don't have much trouble with it, but sometimes I can imagine, and it is, in fact, difficult to write the first chapter of a story you've got planned. So how do you actually get around to doing it well?
I'd say two things to this. Oh, sorry, you had more?
And the second question, if I can remember it.
I'll answer the first one while you think if that's cool. Because what I'd say is, one, just write it, because you'll probably edit it anyway. And two, once you figure out the ending, rewrite your beginning so that you see the threads through there. Because everyone loves to see a narrative that's cyclical. And so just bash it out. Just figure out where it should start. And when you write a scene, come in late, leave early. Is a really good rule. Yeah, that'd be the two things that I'd say.
First chapters are probably some of the hardest things you can write, and you have to kind of put all the places in, take it slow. But if you can definitely manage to just think about it, get the hook in as quickly as possible, get your idea in to rope people in, then you can get that chapter going.
Yeah, that first sentence for me is the hardest of all, because you do want to draw the reader into the story. And it's hard to do sometimes. And sometimes you just sit there, again, staring at a screen, and you need to get out. For me, anyways, I need to get out, play some basketball or something, come back and look at it. And sometimes you'll write that first sentence 2 or 3 times, and you just got to keep rewriting it until you're happy with it. But again, make sure you're happy with it.
All right, and now I've remembered my second question. I write fanfic a lot myself. I don't actually get much help from pre-readers or from editors or so on, because I usually think I'm self-sufficient. Do you think it's better sometimes to get someone to help you with your story but delay it a little, or just to put it out there and see what people think, then fix upon the mistakes there?
100%, I'd say get a friend to begin with, but definitely find a proofreader if you're really serious about what you want to do.
Do not do what I do. But yes, I totally agree. I would even go as far as saying get a stranger to look at it. For me, anyways, I'd say get a stranger to look at it first, because with a friend, they may not be as brutal with you as a complete stranger would be. And sometimes you need brutality in your life.
It's so confronting to have other people read your work at first. And the other problem is, because it's probably coming early in your career, your work's not that good. It's not. Mine wasn't. No one's is. No one starts great. And you're going to get good through getting notes from people and seeing how things land. And sometimes that's through getting an editor to read it. And at a certain point, it can be just putting it out there and saying, have at it, world, is it any good? But you need those notes at the start. They're not always going to be nice. And I find the level of writer, the better ones take the notes. They get the notes and they go, okay, it's not personal. If someone says this part is no good, or a better editor will say, I don't get this part. I've edited for a few friends and I will ask questions. Why did this happen? Could you do this in a different way? Could you seed this for something else? And it's hard. It's so hard at first, because it is personal, the work. And so you feel that the notes are personal, but it's not. That's not how it works. But yeah, get the notes that you can. Don't get your mum, don't get your friends, because they're not good notes. They're like, that's so great, I love you, see you for dinner. That's not a note in a story. So sometimes you don't have anyone to give notes to, so you put it up online. That is absolutely fine, because you don't have those connections.
All right, so we're going to have to take the last couple of questions, because we're going to finish in 10 minutes, so we're going to keep answers short as well. All right, so last one. So 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay, let's do it.
Firstly, everyone wave.
Sorry? Hello. All right, go for it.
Hi. So,
I didn't say stop.
So it's been really great to hear how different your answers are from someone coming from the professional sphere of writing and people coming from the fanfic community. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on how those forms of writing end up being different.
Sorry, I stole your microphone.
One of them makes money. And I come from, one of the first things I wrote was a Daredevil from Marvel Comics, prose short story. And I actually wrote, not a lot of people would know this, like anywhere in the world, I wrote a Daredevil graphic novel. I fully scripted it like 120 pages or something. It's never, ever going to get published, because it's Marvel and because it sucks. It's no good, because it was way early in my career. So, like, I don't know. That'd be the big difference that I would find, though, is the money.
I know I'm not a professional. and the sooner you realize that, if you're first starting out, the easier it'll be on you. Because I get professional people giving me feedback, and it's not good. So it's a continuing learning process, and if you sit there and think, you know, I could sit here and be like, I'm on Equestria Daily. But no, continue to try to get better. Listen to the feedback, because you are probably not as good as you think you are, at least when you start out.
I can't really say much more to that. You have to start from somewhere, and when you do start, you will get better from the very beginning. Going back to what I said about constructive criticism, take that on board with everything that constructive people will say, and you will get better. You might find gigantic increases in quality between chapters.
So I write a lot of fan fiction, but I then find that whenever I try to write freeform stuff, it is already something that's already been done, like it's the plot of a Doctor Who episode or something like that. How do you sort of get out of that habit?
Nothing is original. You have to understand that. And if you can understand that and still do what you do, then that's fine.
It can be really hard to find a story that feels original. Sometimes you can do a mashup. Like I've got the single issue comic on my desk. It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Jingle All the Way meets Sin City. I know, you've all been waiting for that mashup. So sometimes you're borrowing from places, but if there are two ways to do it. Either you finally find that mashup or original idea that is original, or you write it so well that nobody cares. Like if you look at The Hunger Games, this is not an original story. Really in the slightest. It has a few little branches off, but it is very derivative of a few other things. But nobody cares because Hunger Games is well done. And it's not for me, and I watched the movie begrudgingly with my wife, and then I was like, this is good. I didn't mind it at all. But it's totally a rip-off of like Battle Royale, and there's some other earlier things from which it's heavily borrowing, but like Stephen King's The Long Walk. And in the end, I was just like, but is it enjoyable? Yes, go for it. So you can take an idea from elsewhere and you can make it your own. And you can do that in different ways, just by sometimes gender-flipping characters or inserting a different sort of trope to it. You swing it into a crime story or a sci-fi story. But I mean, there are people that say there's only like 7 stories and we all just tell them in different ways. There's the quest, boy meets girl, blah, blah, blah. If you can write it well enough, and write more of it, your brain will start ticking over for those things. And it is important to try and do your own thing because the odds of getting your MLP fanfic picked up, unfortunately, are really slim. But your own thing, you can have that ownership and you can possibly do something with it, even if it's just printing it off yourself. The first thing I ever published was a short story, prose short story, and I sold it through my local bookstore for like $5 each. It was a little A5 booklet. Like it was nothing, no profit. I was turning a loss on every sale, but you can get those things into the world. And I went from there to here.
Just on the topic as well, I'm fairly certain 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fan fiction. Yeah. So, you know, things can happen. You could write an erotic fiction if you so choose.
And I'll tell you what, just last night, I had the idea, I thought it was a brilliant idea, of putting a changeling, having her hide in a circus as a quick change artist. It's been done. So yeah, you just have to decide that, you know, it's probably already been done. Is it worth continuing and putting your own spin on it?
When I first wrote Bright Eyes, that was my first fanfic into the fandom. A few weeks later, I find that there's already a Tumblr blog, Blind Rainbow Dash. And of course, going back further than there are other stories of people going blind. There are other stories of people trying to find themselves or whatever. You just have to do it well, do it your way, and do whatever spin you can to make you happy.
Yep. When you begin writing like all your stories and that, how do you start? Like, do you start from just the beginning and see where they end up, or do you think of a situation a character might be in and work out how they got into that particular situation?
I start in the middle, I find out the end, and then I begin.
Yeah, it's usually an idea with me. For example, Pinky becoming a beard, Princess Luna getting a sugar rush. It's usually just an idea. I know some people like to write, as far as when they're actually literally writing, they will write out that scene and then go back to the beginning and make a beginning and make an end. Again, I break the rules. I don't do that. I always start from the beginning, and I just sort of keep it up here, but whatever works for you.
They say there's 2 types of writers. There's planners and there's pantsers. So there's people that plan, there's those that fly by the seat of their pants. I'm a planner, and it works for me. And there are some great pantsers out there. I can't do it because I don't like it. I like to seed and build things to the end. I like everything to mean something. So I plan it all out, and then then I start doing the actual writing. And that way, I initially started writing a lot of novels, and I've actually written 4 that haven't been published, but good practice. And one of them I wrote where I'd plan 10 chapters, and then I'd write them, and then I'd be like, oh, things change, let's see where we go from there. I couldn't do that now. It would destroy my head. So yeah, I find just really mapping it out, and then you can always fiddle with that plan. I'll write a story plan 10 times, and it'll be different so many times, and sometimes the character will die in the 4th time, 10th time they're alive, but somebody else is with them, and so once you've got the plan nailed down, I feel really confident that the writing, I'm not going to have to goose about with it too much afterwards, because it should be good, hopefully.
Hi. From a comic aspect, like I usually draw, sometimes I'll draw before I actually write what I'm going to do. I find problems like during action scenes and that to like find descriptive words for like, for example, like, sorry, I have a.
You're having trouble finding words to describe things.
Yes, exactly. And dyslexia, so.
Are you talking about like with action scenes?
Yeah, how do you go from the visual to adding words to become more effective?
I find I have a very visual mind, and I know sort of how I want things to. I mean, writing a comic specifically is very much about saying what are the key, like photos basically that you want to show that story, and you don't need to show every little step. We're allowed to use what's called the gutters, and people will then go, all right, if Rainbow Dash is there and then she's in the air, we're going to assume she flew up there, and you don't have to show her flying in a bunch of different ones. So you're trying to figure out just the very key images to tell the story, and it's a very sequential thing. But my art is terrible, and there's one person here who has a sketch, and it's woeful. And I can't do it, but I know that I can see it, and then I convey it to the artist. But I'm working with a guy at the moment on this like lady kung fu revenge one-shot, and there are pages where I just say, she fights this Zangief-looking dude. Make the page look cool, because I know he knows how to make it flow and be kinetic and be awesome, and I'm not going to tell him how to do his job, which he knows how to do better than me. So, I mean, I'm lucky in that respect that I work with really talented artists, and I can just say, shine. And I know when they want to be told that, and I know when other artists want to be told, punch, kick, flip, jump, thumbs up, sort of thing. So,
anything to add to that, or you're cool? All right. Go for it.
I just wanted to ask, does anybody use Comixology to get their comics here? Comixology is an app which you can then download comics and read them. And so all the My Little Pony comics are on there, and periodically they'll have 99-cent sales. You wait for those, you jump on them, they're awesome. If you see me on there, like I wrote the Rainbow Dash one, you can click on my name and find other books that I read, and I'll have a new series, a much more adult series, so I won't describe it in detail, but it launches in March, and it's through a publisher, Monkey Brain, so it's called Headspace. Happily talk to you about it at the table if you want to know more about it. I could even show you a little bit of art. But thank you.
Lovely. Do you guys want to say anything before we head off?
I love you all. From the bottom of my heart. I will give you all hugs. If you want to line up, I'll give you all hugs.
I love you more.
I love you even more.
No, you don't.
I hate you all.
Yes, I hate you too.
I feel like after this, everyone's just going to come up to me and keep telling me they hate me. It's happened. I've had hugs and hate. It's a big mix. Don't you eye me up, son. I will take you. All right, so thank you very much for coming. We filled it out. It like kind of started really slow, and then a lot of people joined.
I think they're waiting for the next panel. Thanks for sitting through it, guys.
Thank you very much. Say goodbye to all our lovely guests. We have Ryan K Lindsay, Del Simpson, and TheSlorg.